The misunderstood strategy. The alien Federation of Orion was renowned across the galaxy for its military might. Their fleets conquered worlds, their armies crushed rebellions, and their war strategies were studied by every race hoping to understand the secret of their success. It was said that no force could withstand the onslaught of the Orion armies. So when the Federation's scouts reported a primitive species on a little blue planet, Earth, the war strategists were intrigued, but not particularly concerned. After all, what could these so-called humans possibly offer in a conflict? The Federation's military leaders decided to demonstrate their power by launching a series of strategic strikes on Earth. The humans, after all, were awful at war, as the Federation's analysts had concluded. Little did they know, the real lesson was yet to come. In a small, rural town in the heartland of Earth, news of the invasion reached the people. Panic spread initially, but as the weeks went by, it became clear that the humans were not reacting as expected. Instead of the anticipated surrender, the Earth's defense forces rallied with a tenacity that seemed almost reckless. They were disorganized, their technology was outdated, and their strategies appeared to lack any coherent form. The Federation's commanders couldn't help but laugh at the human attempts to mount a defense. The humans' efforts were clumsy and chaotic, and the Federation expected a swift victory. But then something odd began to happen. The more the Federation pushed, the more the humans seemed to embrace their apparent ineptitude. Local militias formed with a fervor that defied all expectations. They employed unconventional tactics, using the terrain and their environment in ways that no strategist could predict. Their methods were far from standard military practices, and yet they were proving increasingly difficult to subdue. General Thrax, a respected strategist in the Federation, watched with a mix of amusement and growing frustration. His fleet had been prepared for a quick and decisive victory, but instead, they faced an adversary who seemed to take pleasure in turning their every expectation upside down. Why are they fighting like this? Thrax wondered aloud, observing the bizarre tactics through his ship's viewport. It's as if they're deliberately making things difficult. Izaid, a junior officer named Zilara, examined the data with a furrowed brow. They appear to be improvising on the fly. It's as if they're not bound by traditional rules of engagement. They're unpredictable. That's putting it mildly, Thrax replied. Their lack of a cohesive strategy is infuriating. They're not just bad at war. They're stubbornly refusing to play by any rules we understand. As the days turned into weeks, the Federation's initial confidence began to wane. The humans were proving to be an unmanageable foe, not because of their military prowess, but because of their sheer unpredictability and unwillingness to follow the script. The more the Federation pushed, the more they found themselves embroiled in a war that defied every expectation. The art of chaos. Despite their lack of advanced technology and formal military training, the humans on Earth exhibited a unique kind of warfare, a chaotic creativity that perplexed their invaders. As the Federation continued their assault, they encountered guerrilla tactics that seemed less like organized military maneuvers and more like a series of spontaneous, yet surprisingly effective, responses. One particular instance of this chaos unfolded in the city of New York. The Federation forces had anticipated a simple occupation, but were met with a bewildering array of homemade traps, improvised weapons, and an unending stream of civilians who seemed to revel in their role as unwitting combatants. The human defenders, though outmatched in terms of firepower, were experts at using their environment to their advantage. They converted everyday objects into makeshift weapons and turned the urban landscape into a maze of obstacles for their enemies. Captain Raxer, a field commander of the Federation's 12th Tactical Unit, was sent to quell the rising resistance in New York. His initial plan was straightforward: establish control of key infrastructure and crush the human resistance. However, his plans quickly went awry as his unit fell victim to a series of bizarre and seemingly random attacks. One moment, they were engaged in a firefight with what appeared to be a ragtag group of civilians. armed with nothing more than hunting rifles and homemade explosives. The next, they were forced to navigate through a labyrinth of burning barricades and makeshift traps. Rax's frustration mounted as he tried to adapt to the unpredictable nature of human warfare. "These tactics are absurd," he fumed. "They're not fighting us in any conventional sense. They're turning everything into a weapon." The turning point came when Rax's unit was ambushed by a group of humans wielding a curious contraption made from old plumbing parts and gasoline. The device, though crude, created a massive explosion that crippled the Federation's command center. Raxa was forced to retreat, and the news of the defeat spread quickly. Back at the Federation's headquarters, the analysts were stumped. These humans, their tactics are not only unorthodox, but seem to be tailored specifically to frustrate our strategies, one of them remarked. General Thrax, who had been closely monitoring the situation, finally began to see the pattern. "They're not just fighting us. They're exploiting every possible opportunity to undermine our efforts. Their lack of formal training is less of a disadvantage than we thought. It's giving them the freedom to innovate in ways we can't anticipate." The realization was dawning. The humans were not merely bad at war. They had turned their apparent weaknesses into a form of chaotic artistry. Their unpredictable nature was proving to be their greatest asset. As the Federation continued their assault, they found themselves increasingly entangled in a conflict that defied every conventional understanding of warfare. The resilience of humanity. As the conflict raged on, the Federation's forces continued to be frustrated by the resilience and adaptability of the humans. Despite their initial underestimation, the invaders were now faced with an adversary whose ability to endure and improvise seemed boundless. The humans' capacity to withstand losses and continue fighting in the face of overwhelming odds was a testament to their indomitable spirit. In one notable encounter, Federation troops attempted to launch a full-scale assault on a fortified human position. The Federation's strategy was to use superior firepower to break through the defenses and secure the area. However, the humans' response was far from the expected surrender or retreat. Instead, they held their ground with a resolve that defied all logic. Lieutenant Commander Zephron, leading the Federation's assault, was astonished by the human defenders' tenacity. "They're not giving up," he said, disbelief evident in his voice. "We've taken significant losses, and they're still fighting as if they have no intention of surrendering." The human defenders, led by a grizzled veteran named Sergeant Thomas, were deeply entrenched in their position. Thomas and his unit had endured numerous Federation assaults, each one more intense than the last. Despite the constant bombardment and dwindling supplies, they refused to yield. Sergeant Thomas's strategy was simple but effective. "We hold this line," he said to his men. "No matter what happens, we hold this line." The humans' ability to endure and adapt became increasingly apparent as they managed to repel several Federation offensives. Their defensive positions were fortified with salvaged materials and improvised technology, creating barriers that the Federation struggled to breach. As the weeks passed, the Federation's high command began to take notice. General Thrax, observing from his command ship, was struck by the sheer resilience of the human defenders. "They're not just fighting with whatever they have," he noted. "They're fighting with a determination that's almost unwavering." The Federation's analysts began to rethink their assessment of human warfare. The initial belief that humans were simply inept at war was giving way to a new understanding. The humans' apparent ineptitude was masking a deep-seated resilience. Their ability to persevere in the face of adversity and their unwavering commitment to their cause were turning the tide of the conflict. In the wake of these realizations, the Federation's leadership was faced with a sobering truth. The humans were not just bad at war. They were capable of withstanding and even thriving in the most adverse conditions. Their resilience was proving to be a formidable challenge for the Federation's once unassailable military might. The turning tide. As the conflict continued, the Federation's high command began to acknowledge that their initial assumptions about human warfare had been fundamentally flawed. What had been perceived as ineptitude was now being recognized as a form of resistance that was both unpredictable and incredibly effective. The turning point came during a decisive battle in the city of Paris. The Federation had launched a massive offensive, expecting to decisively crush the human resistance. However, the humans had prepared a series of elaborate traps and countermeasures that transformed the battlefield into a chaotic maze. Federation troops found themselves caught in a series of ambushes and setbacks, unable to maintain their momentum. Colonel Xanta, a veteran of many campaigns, was leading the Federation's forces in the battle. Frustrated by the unexpected challenges, he demanded a detailed assessment of the situation. "What's going wrong?" he asked his strategic advisors. "Why can't we break their lines?" One of the analysts, Lieutenant Schurer, reviewed the data and offered a grim assessment. "The humans have turned the city into a fortress. They've used every building, every street, and every alley to their advantage. Their defensive positions are ingeniously concealed, and their attacks are coming from directions we can't predict." The Federation's forces struggled to adapt to the rapidly changing battlefield. The humans' resilience and creativity continued to outmaneuver the Federation's superior firepower. As the battle dragged on, the Federation's casualties mounted, and the initial confidence of their commanders began to wane. In the midst of the chaos, a message was transmitted from the human side. It was a simple statement, but carried a profound weight. "We don't fight to win. We fight because we must." This message resonated deeply with the Federation's commanders. It was clear that the humans were driven by a sense of purpose and determination that transcended the conventional notions of warfare. They fought not for victory alone, but for survival, and this fundamental difference in motivation was proving to be a game-changer. The Federation's High Command, now fully aware of the depth of human resolve, began to reassess their strategy. General Thrax, who had initially underestimated the humans, acknowledged the need for a new approach. "We're facing an enemy who fights with a level of determination we didn't anticipate," he said. "It's time we recognize their strength and adapt accordingly." As the Federation sought to recalibrate their strategy, the humans continued to hold their ground with an unyielding spirit. The Battle for Paris, once thought to be a certain victory for the Federation, became a symbol of the resilience and adaptability of the human spirit. The tide of the conflict was shifting, and the Federation's command was forced to confront the reality that their initial assumptions about human warfare had been profoundly mistaken. The ultimate lesson. The conflict on Earth had reached a critical juncture. The Federation's initial efforts to subdue the humans had been met with resistance that defied all expectations. The once misunderstood tactics and resilience of the humans had transformed the war into a protracted and grueling struggle. In the final stages of the conflict, the Federation's leadership convened a high-level summit to address the situation. General Thrax, along with his senior advisors, reviewed the progress of the war and the implications of their experiences. The lessons learned from the conflict with humanity were becoming increasingly clear. "We've underestimated them from the start," Thrax admitted. Their apparent ineptitude was a facade masking an unrelenting will to fight. Their ability to adapt and persevere in the face of overwhelming odds has challenged every assumption we had about warfare. The summit reached a consensus. The humans were not merely bad at war. They were exhibiting a form of warfare that was profoundly different from anything the Federation had encountered. Their chaotic creativity, resilience, and unwavering determination had transformed them into a formidable adversary. In the aftermath of the conflict, a ceasefire was declared. The Federation, having endured significant losses and faced an enemy whose strength lay in their unpredictability, recognized the need for a new approach to understanding and engaging with humanity. The war had taught them an invaluable lesson, that the true nature of warfare lay not just in tactics and technology, but in the indomitable spirit of the beings involved. As the Federation's forces withdrew and peace negotiations began, there was a palpable sense of respect for the humans. They had demonstrated that even those who appeared to be awful at war could possess qualities that defied conventional expectations. The final report from the Federation's analysts summed up the experience succinctly. Humanity has proven that they are not just a primitive species. They have shown us that even in the face of overwhelming odds and apparent ineptitude, there exists a profound strength and resolve that can reshape the very nature of conflict. The war with Earth had been a profound and humbling experience for the Federation. It had shattered preconceived notions and underscored the importance of recognizing the inherent value and strength in every sentient species, regardless of their apparent shortcomings. The ultimate lesson was clear. Never underestimate the power of a determined and resilient spirit, for it can turn even the most improbable underdog into a force to be reckoned with. And so the story of the conflict with humanity became a cautionary tale, a reminder that sometimes the most profound lessons in warfare come from those who seem the least likely to make a stand. The Federation's encounter with Earth had reshaped their understanding of war, and, in doing so, had forever altered the course of their interactions with the galaxy's myriad inhabitants.